Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague, Russell Berger, both attorneys at Offit Kurman. And today we are talking about interviewing. So things to do, things not to do, things to avoid from a compliance perspective. So I know, Russell, you and I have both interviewed people before. Obviously, a lot of our clients, come to us about interviewing candidates and things they can do, things they can't do. What are some things that employers should be keeping in mind when interviewing?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the things not to do because those are kind of easier to rattle off. I mean, obviously, we've talked a ton on here and in general in our practices about discrimination and discriminatory issues, and obviously harassment as well. All those things fall in the do not ask about list. So, the idea in the interviewing process, is what the hiring process more broadly, is to not ask questions that will give you information that could lead to a claim that you used it against them in a discriminatory manner. Some things are obvious. Don't ask about a person's gender. Don't ask about a person's race. Um, some things might be a little bit more nuanced, like don't ask about their family situation and what their family planning situation might be. And sometimes that might, that seems easy enough for us to say here, but in normal conversation, things may come up along those lines. And even though it's a little bit awkward, the best practice is to not do what you might normally do in ordinary conversation. Don't ask that follow-up question. That's the better, safer way to go, but in the interview process.
I think that's a really great point, Russell, because I think that is the most challenging piece is that interviews often can feel really formal or really informal or somewhere in between, right? And you kind of want to hit that right spot where you're able to get enough information out to understand the candidate and whether they might be a good cultural fit and all of those things. But because of that, and because you're kind of threading this needle around how much to ask, how little to ask, it becomes conversational. I think there is a lot more danger that something can come off a certain way as well that is unintentional. And it's just important to kind of keep your wits about you in that regard about what you're saying, go in with a plan. And allowing the other person that you're interviewing to be the one kind of sharing information, asking open-ended questions, and really trying to gather that information and being flexible enough to still get the information that you need while keeping in mind where the certain areas where you shouldn't go.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think it's a particular challenge for lawyers as interviewers because we're so used to trying to ask questions we already know the answer to and to ask leading questions. And those are all really bad practices for interviewing because you want the person you're interviewing to share their story. And one of the things that I certainly would recommend is asking experiential questions like, tell me about a time when, and fill in the blank with whatever you're asking for. I also think it's really helpful before you go into the interview process, not just with one person, but for a position, to really think about what it is that you're looking for in that position. Is it a skill set? Is it an experience level? Is it a personality type? Is attitude more important than experience or vice versa? All those things are kind of good triage to do as you're going into the process, so then you can make sure that in the interview, your questions, which hopefully are open-ended, experiential type questions, get at that and can source kind of the information that you're looking for that you think is really important for the position you're hiring for.
And I think another thing to think about going into it, just for congruency between different interviews, because let's say you're going to interview 5 candidates, and sometimes topics are going to come up in those interviews around family status or different things, because it does happen. And when someone's telling a story, that information may come out. And I often have employers ask, well, what do I do now? I've had one candidate tell me that they have 4 kids and I don't know the familial status of anybody else. And if I don't pick them, how does that look, right? And one way to kind of be prepared for situations like that, because stuff does come up in interviews, is to make sure you have a clear, job description and clear idea of the type of candidate that you're looking for going into the process as well. Because that really, because you'll learn things during the interview process as well that might disqualify someone as a candidate because they don't meet the basic requirements around their education or around these other topics. So not always possible to have all of those details thought out, but want to be able to try to be consistent between the people that you're interviewing and be able to really look at it in a well-rounded, objective manner, and that can help with that. Well, thanks, Russell, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.